Hey, Divine Ones, this is Jerome Braggs, the Soul Medicine Man, and I wanted to come to you all today and talk about a question I received recently asking me, what spiritual awakening actually is. Like, what does it really mean? I speak a lot about awakening. I have correlated my healing journey to an awakening process. And if you're on a spiritual path at all, or you've been interested in spirituality, or you've been studying it a little bit, you've been reading some books or going to workshops, I'm sure you've heard about people talk about awakening. Either and usually you hear about it in the term of like my awakening journey, or somebody say my awakening journey, or you need to go through awakening process or something like that. So I wanted to address that because it's a word that's becoming more and more mainstream, a word that's becoming more and more widely used, and you're going to hear it a lot. And there are many different kind of and people. Some people, if you're new to it, it's very you don't understand. Just like this question about what's being talked about. So I want to address very quickly what spiritual awakening actually is, what it actually means. But I also want to talk about something else, which is why it's not the final step. I know a lot of people, when we start to get into the definition of it, will attribute awakening to like the big all is kind of end all thing that happens. And it's really not the final step on your spiritual growth. It's really not the final step on the expansion of you as a human being on the planet. So I want to dive right into that. This is not going to be a long video, but spiritual awakening, what it actually means really is that is awareness. Is that you have a level of awareness of who you really are, of what your divine nature really is, of what your spiritual essence really is. So you understand not just that, you're a spiritual being having a human experience, but what it actually means to be a spiritual being. That you are eternal, that you are worthy, that you are loved, that you're not just this being that's a part of the universe, but you're the entirety of the universe itself, that you are the universe, right? And so there's different stages of awakening that we go through, because we may just understand in the beginning that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, right? That may just be the first level of the awakening that may happen. Like, for instance, my own stages of awakening, that was the first stage of my understanding, was that I was a spiritual being having a human experience. I was more than what I was being taught in my schools. I was more than what I was being taught in my culture. I was more than I was being taught in my education, or even in the religious upbringing that I was brought in. That there was more to me than that. That I wasn't just this flesh and blood, brown skinned human being, that I was more than that. There was another aspect of me. And so awakening is the process which you become aware of the other aspect of you. So the first stage of that usually is that you understand that there's a spiritual part of you, meaning there's a part of you that cannot be seen with your eyes. And it's the larger part of you. It's the eternal part of you. I like to call it your God self, meaning it's the part of you that is one with what we call source or God or all that is. It's not separate from that. It's literally one with it. It is that, right? And so that's where we come to the understanding that you are literally source, your God. And so the first aspect of that understanding for me was that, that there was just more to me. Then as my journey went along, I started to understand, oh no, that I'm God having a human expression as Jerome, just as you're God having a human expression of whoever you are. We're all different versions of each other. There's just one of us here having different versions of that experience. But that's awakening really is just, if you boil it down to the smallest essence, it's really understanding your divine nature and your spiritual essence and the truth of that, right? Becoming aware of what that is. So that that you're worthy, that you're loved, that you're an energetic being, right? That you're not just this physical aspect, that the fullness of you is actually energetic. Even this part of you is really is energy. It's energy vibrating at a frequency that allows you to be human. But that's really, what that is. And there are different varies of awakening that we go through, and there are different stages of it. So you may just understand right now that you're a spiritual being having a human experience. There will be a larger awakening where you understand that that's what that means, right? That that's your energy, and that you're loved, and that you're worthy, and that you're always worthy unconditionally, right? But again, awakening. So that's really what it means. It doesn't mean, by the way, that you're into crystals, or that you must become a vegan, that you must change your diet and become vegan, or that, you need to understand about the chakra system, or that you need to become psychic or intuitive or anything like that. That's not what awakening actually is. Those are external things. Awakening is the internal awareness of who you really are, right? But I want to say again, this is where we go a little deeper, is that awakening is not the last step, because you can have an awareness of something and it still not change your life. And this is what, your spiritual growth, your journey of spiritual growth is about. It's about changing your life for better, so that you're better able to experience more joy, freedom, ease, and love in your life. You're better able to connect with who you really are and express the fullness of that on the planet, right? That's really the next step. And awakening, and spiritual awakening, is like a first step on that journey, because you can be aware of something and not implement it. And that's really what the next step is taking your awareness, like your understanding of it, you're aware of who you are, into actual integration into your way of being. And for a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, who have actually died and they crossed over to the other side, right? For a lot of those people, that was an awakening journey. Just like in my near-death experience, if you followed me for a while, you understand that I've talked a lot about. I had a near-death experience in 2004, then I had another one in 2005. And that those experiences were awakenings for me, but they weren't transformations for me. And that is a total different process. So a lot of people who crossed over to the other side, they become very aware of who they really are. They meet the fullness of themselves. They understand that they're one with all of the universe, that life doesn't end, that death is not an ending, that life just continues. They get a broader understanding and a broader awareness of what's really going on. But if you talk to a lot of people that had a near-death experience, that it changed kind of their awareness of things, and they may have changed kind of what they now believed about certain things, or what they focused on, but their life didn't change. And for many people who had near-death experiences, it took many years before their lives dramatically changed. So their understanding and their awareness may have dramatically changed, but it took many years before their lives, dramatically changed. And that process takes integration and embodiment. That process takes, can you take this from now, something that's in your head, from an understanding you have in your head, and can you take it now into your way of being, right? And what I mean by way of being, and there's 3 areas for your way of being. So one is your consciousness. So can you apply your awakening into understanding who you really are now, into what you believe about yourself, into what you believe about yourself, and what you think about yourself, and what you think about the world around you. So, for instance, before I had my awakening, I thought I was unattractive. I thought I wasn't enough. I carried a lot of fear and worry. I thought I wasn't safe in the world. I wasn't safe to be my true self. As a same gender loving man, as a black man, I had a lot of fear in the world that it just wasn't really safe to fully be all of myself. I also had, I thought that I had to force and push and struggle and fight to make good things happen to me, to have an abundance or prosperity of money, to be successful and do what I wanted in the world. There was just this belief that life was hard and I had to fight to get it. And there were just some other things, that just didn't let me have a sense of true liberation and true worthiness. and enoughness and love. You know, that I felt a lot of shame around my body and around sexuality and around all this stuff, right? So my awakening journey, even though I had this awakening journey where I understood that I started to understand that I was the spiritual being and that I was one with God. It didn't shift things until I shifted my belief systems to match that. Until I started to really believe that I was enough, unconditionally, that I was attractive, no matter what my weight on the scale was, no matter what, what's going on in my body, no matter what my health status was, etc. Until I started to understand that being a spiritual being, being one with all of God, means there's nothing I need to fear. Meaning that there's nothing that's out there, right? That's not, and understanding, another part of the awakening is understanding that you create your reality. You may not be creating it intentionally, right? And that'll be another video I'll talk about, the difference between creation and manifestation. That you're really manifesting your reality all the time. Every aspect of it is the manifestation of you. It may not be a creation of you because you're not intending for some of the things to happen because you don't understand how your world is created. But as a spiritual being, you start to understand your whole life is 100% responsible. That's part of your awakening. You're responsible for 100% of your life. Now, again, what that means, right, is that doesn't change your life. You can read that in a book. You can have a situation in your life that kind of wakes you up to that. It kind of wakes you out of the old system of thinking that you had. Like, again, my near-death experience woke me up out of the old systems of thinking that I had. The old systems that were created through my family upbringing, through my cultural upbringing, through my religious upbringing. It kind of woke me up out of that and was like, here's what's actually really real. Nothing began to transform in my life, though. Right? My life experience didn't become well and delicious, and my body didn't become healthier until the first step. I started to change my consciousness, right? So I started to change what I thought about myself, what I believed about the world and myself, and what I was focusing on in my life, right? So when I began to focus on that I'm actually worthy, and that life wants to prove that to me. When I started to understand that I'm not just a child of the universe, I'm a part of it. I'm a part of all that is. So of course the universe loves me. Of course life loves me. And I don't have to push and struggle and fight so hard to try to make life be good to me because I'm a part of it. Of course it wants to be good to itself. So all of that, like in my mind, began to change how I showed up in the world and change what I expected from the world and what I was creating in the world. The other part of that, remember I said there's 3 areas that you need to start integrating, right? Your way of being is made up of 3 areas. So when you go from awakening into integration and embodiment, it happens in 3 spaces: your consciousness, your vibration, and your lifestyle. So consciousness is what I just talked about. Your vibration is your energy. It's your frequency, and it's really like how you feel internally, your internal state of being. So how you feel habitually, not just like every day, every 5 minutes, what's going on, but like what you habitually feel about yourself and what you habitually feel about the world. And again, your consciousness helps shape that. But again, that was also really paying attention to that because my life is going to be built upon the building blocks of what my internal state of being is. My internal state of being is literally what my external lived reality is reflecting. It's reflecting my internal state of being. So when I began to integrate what I got from my awakening, which was like the understanding that I'm loved. The understanding that I'm loved unconditionally, by the way, and that I am unconditional love, and that, I'm enough, and that I'm safe, and that I'm an eternal being, and that I don't have to fear death anymore, right? And that I can just really make my focus about not just trying to keep death away, but actually trying to keep life flowing through me, right? How do I really make my life about living well? So that when I began to do the internal state of being work, to actually have a state where I felt worthy and I felt free and I felt safe and I felt beautiful and I felt loved, that's when life started to change. And that's when my life is still starting to change, right? The more I'm starting to integrate the awakening. And again, awakening is in stages. So there's another stage for me. I don't know what that is. I know at the beginning of 2018, I began to be called to another stage. And if you've been following me this year, you know I started to talk a lot about coming back home to yourself. And that was another part of my awakening, was like, oh, really, this whole journey is really about reconnecting, re-synergizing yourself with your spiritual essence, with your divine nature, and how every aspect of the well-being of your life depends upon how well you're doing that, and how the health of your body is a reflection of how well you're doing that, right? So that was the next stage of my personal awakening, and that's what I'm kind of integrating into my life and teachings as well. But it's really about, you get your awakening where you start to, and every stage of your life gives you another level of awakening. You just get another level of understanding about who you really are, right? And that's all of what spiritual awakening is. It's getting a deeper awareness and understanding of who you really are. But the real work is an embodiment and integration, that you integrate the understanding of who you are into how you show up for yourself and how you show up for your life. And that's the last aspect, this lifestyle, like building a life, right? Building a life and building an approach towards your life that affirms the truth of who you are, right? Before my awakening, and in the early stages of my awakening, my lifestyle wasn't reflective of what I was understanding about who I really was. So if I understand that I'm lovable and that life loves me and that I'm worthy and that there's nothing that's ever wrong with me, right? As a spiritual being, the truth of my being is that there's nothing ever wrong with me, but that my absolute nature is perfect. That the universe is not judging me, that it loves me unconditionally, and it views me as whole and perfect and complete at all times. When I get that understanding, right, how do I show up in my life with that, right? And how do I show up in my relationships with that? How do I show up, with the approach to my body with that? If I understand that I'm enough and I'm perfect, then I had to get out of the mirror judging my body when it wasn't, tight and toned as in the picture that I had up on my vision board, if it didn't match that, right? And when I understood that I was whole and perfect, then I wasn't always trying to fix myself anymore. That was my life. I had to change my lifestyle, my lifestyle was based on always trying to improve myself or fix myself in some way. I had to release that when I finally began to integrate the fact that, oh, I'm enough, and I'm divine, and I'm perfect just as I am. I don't have to keep trying to fix myself or constantly improve myself. Instead, and this is the integration piece that changes your entire life after your initial awakening. Instead of trying to fix and improve myself, my work is to be myself, to be my true, authentic self in the world, unedited and unashamed. That changes everything. It changes how I feel about myself. It changes how the world responds to me, because no longer am I trying to fix, improve, or hide and suppress aspects of myself that I think aren't, acceptable or approvable or belong, or or somebody may criticize. When I understand that I'm enough and that I'm a divine being sent here on the planet to just express who I am, because here's a part of the awakening process as well. When you understand that you're a facet of God sent to be fully expressed on the planet, then you understand that when you're not being your true self, when you hide some aspect of yourself, when you keep something about you secret, when you try to pretend to be somebody else because you feel ashamed of yourself or you think you're not enough some way, when you do, or you play small, or you try to people please and you don't speak up for what you really believe in, or you don't really live by your values or what's really being called for you to follow in your heart, what you start to understand, right? And again, there's a difference between understanding and application. But what you understand is when you do that, when you know that you are a facet of God being expressed on the planet, and you're not being yourself, what you understand is you are literally keeping God from showing up on earth. You are literally keeping God from showing up on earth like it wanted to show up. Because you're literally, you, me, each one of us is literally a channel for which God comes through the spiritual into the physical. We're literally how God shows up in the physical world. And when you don't be yourself, you're keeping God from being here. That's literally what you're doing. And so you understand that how important it is to be yourself, because being yourself, not only does it feel good, not only does it help you manifest your deepest dreams, because that's the key to manifesting your deepest dreams, is to be yourself. And not only does it heal the body as well. It's a deep authenticity, and being your true self is such a deep medicine. But not only all of that, but again, being yourself brings God to the planet. And so, but you can understand that, right? And before I could, if you had a conversation with me, I could tell you all of that, right? I could spit this out just like that. But I wasn't living it. I wasn't doing it. You know, there were several areas of my life where I was suppressing. I was suppressing all the things that I believed and that my life had been led me to know around metaphysics and spirituality and consciousness. I wasn't sharing my intuitive gifts because, you know, I grew up in a very Christian family, and that was viewed as sacrilegious. And so for years of my life, I didn't let people know that I even had those abilities. My sexuality I kept hidden for many years for fear that I would be, you know, growing up again in a very traditionally Christian home, that was viewed as, you know, one of the biggest sins you could be. And so those things kept me playing small because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to be criticized or judged, or I didn't want to lose people's approval. So although I understood that I needed to live my truth because I was a spiritual being, I wasn't doing it. And that's the difference between awakening and integration and embodiment. They're two different processes, and they're two different journeys. The first is the understanding, and it's necessary that you get the understanding, because that can shift your life. Just the understanding can shift your life as well. But the real major transformation comes when you move from awakening, when you take the next step from awakening into integration and embodiment. So I said I wasn't going to be long, because it got a little bit winded, and I see that there's a lot of comments here. So I'll respond to your comments outside of this video. I'll respond to them in the comment section once I read them later. But I just wanted to share with you all quickly, in response to a question I got about what is spiritual awakening, what does it mean? It's awareness. It's awareness of your spiritual nature, of your truth, of the divine and eternal truth of you that never changes, about your worthiness, your lovability, your eternal well-being, your safety, and how to move that from just an understanding in your head to the embodiment in your way of being. Because when you start to embody it, your entire life begins to match it. It begins to mirror it, right? Your entire life begins to affirm it. Your life begins to confirm it, and it begins to reflect it. And that's when the delicious well-being and wellness and miracles and mystical experiences that make your life worth living, that's when they really start to show up, and that's when they start to manifest on a more consistent basis. And that's when they do so without you having to push and struggle and fight so much. That's when you're really in the flow, because you become in alignment with who you really are. You've come back home to who you really are. So that's it, you guys. That's awakening. That's what it means. And that's a little bit about what the next step after awakening really is. Thank you all for watching. As always, I love you, and I wish you be home, be happy, be well. Bye.